Ow. He just farted.
Hi everyone, we're on the video talking about farting. That's Tyler and Landon. If you hear anything else, it's Michael. But here is chapter 20 of How to Steal a Dog.
It bit my butt cheek.
That was Michael. I had to admit, Toby had been pretty good at stealing a dog. He had thought of stuff like food and all. He had found the string leash, and best of all, he hadn't goofed up and told Mama what he had done. So I felt kind of bad when taking Willie back to Carmela's without him. I knew he'd be mad as all get out. And I knew Mr. White would be mad as all get out if I missed school again and didn't bring a note from Mama. I knew he'd have a meeting with the principal like he'd warned me would happen. A meeting to talk about me and how much I'd been messing up. A meeting about why my mom wouldn't answer Mr. White's letters and all. I knew what was ahead of me if I did what I planned, but I was going to do it anyways. I made sure Toby was in his classroom. Then I hurried back outside and raced over to the old house. I couldn't hardly get my feet to go fast enough as I pushed through the bushes on my way to the back. Michael, stop. Stop, please. Michael. Please, Willie. Please. There. Please, Willie. Be there. I said over and over inside my head. As soon as I rounded the corner of the house, I heard Willie's happy little yips. Hey there, fella, I called, hurrying over to the porch. Willie stuck his head through the torn screen and wagged his whole body. I sat on the step and let him jump through the screen door into my lap. How you doing, fella? I said, scratching the top of his head. He sniffed my backpack, making little snuffling noises. I pulled out the peanut butter sandwich I had brought him and tore it into pieces. He gobbled them up, swallowing them whole without even chewing. Ready to go home? I said. Willie perked his ears up and let out a little bark. That dog sure was smart. I untied his leash and started for the path that led to the road. But as I was crossing the clearing where Mookie had camped, I noticed something that made me stop. A little green dog collar lying on top of the log that Mookie used to sit on. My heart dropped with a thud. That collar looked familiar. I picked it up and studied the tag. Yep, there it was, plain as day. Willie. I turned it over and read Carmela Whitmore, 27 Whitmore Road, Darby, North Carolina. I felt a big blanket of shame fall over me. Mookie had found Willie's collar. He had known the truth about Willie. He had known the truth about me. I looked down at Willie. He was watching my face like he knew every thought in my head. Mookie knew about us, Willie, I said. Willie whined and wagged his tail. I wonder why he was so nice to me, I said. Willie nudged me with his nose. I buckled the green collar around his neck and said, Come on, Willie, let's go home. By the time I got to the corner of Whitmer Road, Willie was pulling so hard I thought that string was going to bust in two. I knew he was dying to race up the street, through the gate, up the porch steps, through the doggy door, and right into Carmela's lap. But I needed to slow down a minute. I had to make sure the coast was clear and nobody was outside. Hang on, little fella, I said. I squinted up the road, checking out the yards and driveways. Okay, Willie, I said, let's go. I hurried toward Carmela's house. By the time we got to the hedge, Willie was practically going crazy, leaping and carrying on. I tiptoed along the hedge, trying to keep Willie from yanking the string right out of my hand. I hoped Carmela wasn't home, but when I got to the gate, I could see her car in the driveway. I untied the string from Willie's collar. Then I took his whiskery face in both my hands and rubbed his nose back and forth against his, an Eskimo kiss. I lifted the latch and opened the gate. Then I let go of Willie's collar and watched him dash across the yard and up to the steps, then disappear through the doggy door and into the house. I turned and hurried back up the road, but the farther I got from Carmela's house, the heavier my feet felt. By the time I got to the corner, they felt like cement bricks, slowing me down until I couldn't take another step. What's wrong with you, Georgina? I said to myself. Don't stop now. Get on out of here before somebody sees you. But I guess my heart was taking over my feet, making me stop, making me turn around, making me walk on back to Carmela's. I stood outside the gate. Music from a radio drifted out the screen door. More than anything, I wanted to disappear, to leave Whitmer Road and never come back, to just pretend that I never laid eyes on Willie or Carmela, but I couldn't. I took a deep breath and put my hand on my heart. I could feel it beating fast and hard. Then I opened the gate and made my cement feet walk up the sidewalk to Carmela's front door. "Carmela," I called through the screen. "Georgina," Carmela squealed from inside. "Guess what?" She came to the door carrying Willie. He was licking her face all over and wiggling his whole body. "Willie's home," Carmela said. Tears were streaming down her face, and she looked about as happy as a person could be. "He just came running right through that doggy door and into the kitchen like he'd never been gone." She kissed Willie's nose. "Can you believe that?" she said. "No," I said. "I mean, yeah, I can believe that, 'cause, come on in." Carmela pushed the screen door open. "I'm gonna give him a bath. He's a mess." I stepped inside, but first, Carmela said, "I'm gonna cook him some sausage." "Carmela," I followed her down the hall and into the kitchen. I need to, it's fine." But Carmela wasn't listening. She was humming and talking to Willie while she put little sausages in a frying pan. "Carmela," I said louder than I meant to because it sounded like a yell. She looked at me kind of surprised. "I need to tell you something," I said. She put a lid on the pan and turned to me. "Okay," she said. I looked down at the dirty linoleum floor. Willie had left little muddy paw prints in front of the stove where Carmela was standing. "I stole Willie," I said to the floor. A terrible silence settled over the room. I could hear Carmela's wheezing breathing, in and out, in and out. Finally, she said, "What do you mean?" I looked up. She was standing by the stove, holding a fork. Her face was white, making her freckles stand out like sprinkles on cinnamon. Willie sat at the floor beside her, watching her, waiting for that sausage. "I mean, I stole Willie," I said. "I took him right out of your yard." Carmela gripped the edge of the counter for a minute, then pulled out a chair and sank into it. "But why?" she said. And then I did the hardest thing I'd ever done. I told Carmela everything. I started with those 3 rolls of quarters and the wadded up dollar bills in the mayonnaise jar. And I ended with Mookie leaving Willie's little green collar on that log. And then I waited for Carmela to hate me. But you know what? She reached out and took my hands in hers and didn't sound at all hateful when she said, "I guess bad times can make a person do bad things, huh?" I hung my head and couldn't get myself to say another word. "You did a real bad thing, Georgina," Carmela said. I nodded, keeping my head down so my hair would hide my face. Tears dropped right off the end of my nose and onto the floor. The room was silent, except for the sizzle of the sausage on the stove and the tick, tick, tick of the clock over the refrigerator. Carmela pushed herself off the chair and went over to the stove. She took the sausages out of the pan and cut them into pieces. Willie whined at her feet. Tick, 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 went that clock. "I'm sorry," I said. Tick, 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 went that clock. Carmela dropped the sausage pieces into Willie's bowl. He gobbled them up and kept licking the bowl, making it slide across the floor. "I guess I better go," I said. But I didn't move. I stayed there with my heavy cement feet planted firmly on the cracked linoleum of Carmela's kitchen floor, waiting for her to make me feel better. But she didn't. So I moved. "It's fine. It's fine." So I stayed on my heavy feet, one in front of the other, down the hall, through the front door, and out onto the porch. I was almost to the gate when Carmela called, "Georgina?" I stopped and turned around. She stood on the porch holding Willie. His tail wagged thwack, thwack, thwack against her leg. "Why don't you and Toby come by tomorrow?" she said. "Y'all could take Willie for a walk." I felt my whole self get lighter, as if that heavy blanket of shame I'd been wearing had been lifted right up off of me. I nodded. "Okay," I said. "We will." Then I hurried out of the gate and up the road. I couldn't wait to tell Toby what I'd done. I knew he wouldn't be mad when I told him how happy Willie was and how Carmela didn't hate us. I'd let him hold the leash when we walked Willie tomorrow, and he wouldn't think I was mean anymore. When I got to the corner of Whitmer Road, I stopped and looked back. Carmela was still standing on the porch, holding Willie like she wasn't ever going to put him down. She waved at me. I waved back. Then, just as I was about to turn and head back toward the highway, I glanced down and noticed my footprints in the dirt along the side of the road. I smiled, thinking about Mookie and his motto, about the trail you leap behind being more important than the path ahead. Then I turned and raced off toward school to wait for Toby. Chapter 21. We lived in that nasty old car for 2 more days. Then one day, Mama came back from work and said, "Pack your bags, boys and girls, we're moving." Me and Toby looked at each other, then back at Mama, waiting. She tossed 2 Snicker bars into the back seat and said, "You heard me, we're moving." And I'm talking house, a real house. Me and Toby started whooping and bouncing up and down on the back seat. Then we took down our beach towel wall and jammed all our stuff into garbage bags, school books and dirty t-shirts, playing cards and comic books. As we drove to our new house, I felt a flutter of excitement as I thought about being normal again. I pictured myself going to school in clean clothes and having all my homework done, and Mama telling Mr. White that everything was fine now, so don't worry about Georgina anymore. I pictured me and Luann having a sleepover like we used to, painting our toenails and sharing our secrets, maybe working on our cooking badge for Girl Scouts. I even pictured myself sitting on my very own bed wearing my new ballet shoes, combing my hair so I'd look nice for my ballet lessons with Luann and Liza Thomas. We all pulled up in front of our new house. Me and Toby grinned at each other. It was a tiny white house with a rusty swing set in the red dirt yard and a refrigerator with no door sitting right up on the front porch. But it looked like a castle to me. Somebody named Louise was already living there with her baby named Drew. Louise was a friend of Patsy's and needed somebody to share the house with her and help her take care of Drew and pay some of the rent. I didn't have my very own room, but I had my very own bed. Louise gave me a plastic laundry basket to keep my things in and told me to put it up on the closet shelf so Drew couldn't get my stuff. The first night in our new house, Mama brought home pizza and we watched TV. Before I went to sleep, I lay in my bed stretched my legs out under the cool sheets. The tiny window across the room was open, and a soft breeze lifted the faded curtains. Moss flapped and buzzed against the screen. I reached under my pillow and took out my glittery purple notebook. I turned to How to Steal a Dog notes, and in the dim glow of the hall light, I read through step 8 again and about making a decision, about getting the reward or not getting the reward. I smiled to myself when I read the part that said, "That is the decision you will have to make." I knew I had made the right decision because my tapping insides were finally settled down, but I still felt bad about what I'd done. I still wished I could turn back the time far enough to where I could do things different. But at least I had gotten to step 8. I'd made the right decision. I turned to a fresh page in my notebook and wrote May 3rd. Step 9. Those are all the rules for How to Steal a Dog. But I drew red hearts around the word but. Then I wrote in great big letters, "Don't steal a dog." Because I drew a blue circle around because. Then I took out my gold glitter pen and wrote, "It is not a good idea." The end. I closed my window and slid it back up under my pillow. As I lay there in my very own bed, I thought about Mookie. I wondered what he was doing right that very minute. Was he making Hoover gravy? Was he wiggling that 3-fingered hand of his at somebody? Was he fixing somebody's car? Where was he living? Where was he leaving his trail now? I thought about Willie too. I bet he was curled up on the foot of Carmela's bed beside his chewed up toys, dreaming about sardines and liver pudding, happy as anything to be back home. I looked over at Toby, sucking his thumb in the bed next to mine. Then I tiptoed over to the window and looked out into the night. I took a deep breath. The air smelled good, like honeysuckle and new mowed grass. It didn't stink at all. And that is the end of How to Steal a Dog. Bye, guys. Have a great day.